Hello and welcome to Hexed Countered. My name is Joe. Today I am going to be doing a gameplay example. I'm not going to call it a playthrough because I probably won't play the entire scenario. So we're going to play some of one of the scenarios here from the Panzer Grenadier series. This is part of my look at various platoon level tactical games. And obviously this one is Panzer Grenadier from Avalanche Press. The game itself is Fire in the Steppe, Battles in Ukraine, 1941. And this is set during Operation Barbarossa in June of 41 and covering the invasion of the Soviet Union by the Germans. And this one is basically set around the tank battle of Brody-Dubno. As you can see here, probably it says named for the two West Ukrainian towns at the center of the fighting, and it would be by some measures the largest tank battle of World War II, and definitely the largest waged up until that point. Now, the funny thing is I'm doing this one on this, and I will be doing two games that deal with another contender, shall we say, for the moniker largest tank battle in history, and that would be Kursk. Which was going on 80 years ago to the day as I'm doing this video in early July of 2023. So there will be some videos on the games. I've chosen two games that actually deal with that battle. And this game deals with, obviously, the Brody-Dubno. And Paths to Hell, which is the fourth game, is also set during Barbarossa. I have not really decided what particular scenario I'm going to play with that one yet. And I think probably Nations at War will be next. That is the lock and load entry. And Stalin's Triumph is the game, and that one covers Kursk. So I'll probably do that one next. And then I'll do likely Paths to Hell, switch back to Barbarossa, and then finish up with Platoon Commander Deluxe Battle of Kursk from Flying Pig Games. And depending on how things go, I may also do some stuff on the Grossdeutschland division through MMP The Gamers GD42, as well as GMT Games Fighting Formations Grossdeutschland Division. Both of those deal with the same unit, though not specifically in the same time frame. Well, both were Eastern Front, but not necessarily at the same battles. So that's enough preliminary. I did want to discuss what scenario I'll be doing. So the way Panzer Grenadier games are set up, they generally come with a lot of scenarios. There are 42 scenarios in this particular game. And they're set up in kind of chapters that are kind of battles. We do have some special rules here at the beginning that talk about the special rules for this particular entry in the series, because obviously World War II, just like most other things, was not a one-size-fits-all kind of situation. The battle games, they're kind of what I was talking about with chapters. So as far as special rules here, the one thing that we want to talk about probably will be tank leaders on the Soviet side. So it says all German, well, both sides really, all German tanks have leaders and armor efficiency. We'll talk about that when we start playing. Soviet RKKA tanks, that's the Red Army of Workers and Peasants in Russian, RKKA. Tanks do not have armor efficiency and have a specified number of tank leaders. So the scenario will tell us how many tank leaders they get. And I'll get into the leaders and how all that works here as we start playing. So battle games, they have linked scenarios that kind of all cover a subset of the overall fighting around that Brody-Dubno battle and during it as well, of course. So I chose, see here we have the left flank, but I chose something from Chapter 2, Rude Surprise. And what we're going to do is this duel at Sabanovka. So this was on June 23rd of 41. And it says, on the morning of June 23rd, another battle group from the 11th Panzer Division set out southward from the town of Stoyanov with two tank companies in the lead. Near the village of Sabanovka, they ran into the Soviet 10th Tank Division, one of the few Soviet armored units with thorough, large unit training behind it and a full complement of modern KV tanks. A gun duel began at 800 to 1,000 meters. This is a 22-turn Scenario, the first turn takes place at 0700. The time scale of this game per turn is 15 minutes, just if I had not mentioned that before. I did do a first look, so you may want to watch that to get a little bit of detail on how the game works. I'll go over everything pretty much while we play, but in general, if you did want to check that out, it might be a good idea. Here are our the unit mix. So for the 11th Panzer, we enter on spit. Enter on turn 1 anywhere along the north edge. 3 infantry, 1 Panzer II, 2 Panzer III Gs, 2 Panzer IV Es, a heavy machine gun, 2 Panzer III Fs, 2 Panzer III Hs, and 4 SPW 251s. Our leaders, we have a lieutenant and a sergeant. You draw those randomly. I've already drawn them, and we'll talk about that in a minute because some of they vary a little bit in their ratings for morale and combat and so on. So the initiative level, which is added to your die roll when you roll for initiative, for the Germans it's 5. The morale by default for the units is 8 if at full strength and 7 if reduced. There is no off-board artillery for the Germans. On the Soviet side, we have elements of the 10th Tank Division. They enter turn 1 anywhere on the south edge. They have 4 T-34As and 2 KV-1s. These are all platoons. This is a platoon level game, so these are tank platoons and infantry platoons, etc. They have 2 tank leaders, so this plays into what I mentioned with the special rules. Their initiative number is only a 2, so obviously the Germans have a +3 advantage on initiative. Their morale is 8 at full strength, 6 at reduced, and they also have no off-board artillery. Special rules, German initiative level is lowered by 1 for every 6 steps eliminated with tanks counting double. Soviet initiative level is lowered by 1 for every 3 steps eliminated. And all they have is tanks, so basically it works out about the same. Victory conditions, the player with the fewest number of steps eliminated at the end of play wins. Tanks count double. Conclusion, the Germans took the worst of the encounter, losing 5 tanks while watching their shells bounce off this previously unreported new type of Soviet tank. That would be the KV. The 10th Tank Division's commander, Major General Sergei Y. Ogatsov, reported that nothing could stop the KV tanks, but his division had no tractors with which to recover damaged vehicles. When a KV broke down, its crew had to abandon it and set it afire. So that was kind of one of the many issues the Soviet Red Army had at the beginning of the war. Obviously, they got all that stuff worked out before too long, and the rest, as they say, is history. The Germans ultimately could not deal with the Red Army. I'm going to set up a little bit here. I'm zoomed in a little more than I will be when we play. This right here is my dice tower. These are the Soviet units that are off board. I actually turned the map 90 degrees counterclockwise. This is the south edge. North edge will be over in that direction. And I did that so that it would fit nicely in the shot because it's kind of a landscape layout as opposed to the other way where I'd have to move the camera a lot, which would be fine, except that it's just easier to do it this way. You can get the whole map at the beginning while we're moving. And then once we get into range where we're actually fighting, I'll zoom in a little bit because the units will obviously be closer to each other at that point in time. So I'm going to reset the shot, and then we'll talk about the units. We kind of see over here, I could maybe just do that since we're already zoomed in here. We have 3 stacks of Soviets, 2 T-34s here, 2 KV-1s here, and 2 T-34s here. Now, the Soviets have 2 tank leaders. So 2 of these will have inherent leaders and 1 won't. So we'll say one of the stacks of the T-34s has one, and the KVs have one, and then the other stack of T-34s does not. For the beginning, at least, it won't matter all that much because they'll be able to move even without leaders, since you can always move without a leader towards an enemy as long as that enemy cannot fire at you. So if you're out of range, which will be the case at the beginning, you can move towards the enemy. You could also move towards an enemy that doesn't have weapons that can directly hurt you, like an infantry unit if you're in a tank, because they don't have an anti-tank firepower. So that is the Soviet side. Now we'll talk about the German side. Okay, so over here, we have the Germans, and the way I set this up is up top here we have our leaders, okay, our lieutenant and our sergeant. They both have morale ratings of 9. They're both 0. Well, the sergeant is 0-0. The lieutenant is 0-1. We'll talk about that and how it applies when we get a little further into the game. So these are our infantry right here. So we have underneath we'll have infantry platoons underneath. So you line these up, since we're coming in from off the board, you line them up along with the hexes that are on the board, the hexes on which they're going to enter. This is a road. So the German plan is to move these guys in along the road, and then I'm going to send them this way towards this forest, my infantry. The tanks are going to go this way because we have a hill here, and we have a little forested thing here, and I can maybe set up something where I can get, kind of crossfire at the Soviets who are going to be coming this way. So again, this is the north. So this bottom area would be west, and the top area would be east, and then the bottom to the right is obviously south. So as far as the map goes, you probably noticed before when we were looking at the other side, there's a big forest up here. There's some fields here, and then there's a town in the corner down there. So that's the initial setup. The first thing we need to do is roll for initiative. So I'm going to reset my shot again, talk about how initiative works, and then we'll actually start moving units, and eventually we'll get into combat. Okay, so this is the shot we're going to basically be using, at least initially, for a little bit. So here we have our dice tower. Here's our Soviets on the south edge, our Germans on the north edge. These little gray rectangles are weights I'm using just to kind of hold the map down. I did not elect to put plexi over it, only just to keep kind of glare off the map. The map is kind of dark, as you can see. That's been one of the knocks on the Panzer Grenadier series from some people, is they don't really like the maps all that much. I think the map is fine personally, but this is a your mileage may vary kind of situation where some people will like it, some people won't. That's true for pretty much every game. As you can see, this is map number 8 at the top and map number 1 at the bottom, or essentially this is the top, this is the bottom, since this is north, this is south. So typically they'd be turned this way when you're playing, and 8 would be up here and 1 would be down here. But as I already mentioned, I turn the map sideways so that I can get the whole map in one shot. You can also see the dice tower. I can move the turn track in, that's sitting up top here. If I wanted to show it to you, put it like over here or whatever. But again, eventually we're going to tighten up, because most of the fighting is probably going to take place in this area, I would guess. Because I'm not going to get too fancy. I am playing it solo. I want to get into combat. I'm not concerned all that much about who wins, who loses. I'm not going to do anything ridiculously stupid per se, at least not intentionally. But I'm going to drive the Russians north and the Germans south, and we're going to collide and we're going to fight. And that way you'll get an idea of what the game looks like, how combat works, because that's the general purpose here. So we're going to roll 2 dice. We will, as you might guess, use red for the Soviets, and we'll use this white guy for the Germans. And you add their initiative rating, which is 5 for the Germans and 2 for the Soviets, to their roll, and that determines who gets initiative. And then there's a calculation we can do depending on the spread between the 2 rolls to give a number of activations the winning side gets before the losing side gets an activation. And then once that happens, they just alternate. So we're going to roll here. Russians got a 1 and the Germans got a 5. So 5 plus 5 is 10. So they have an advantage of 9. So they're actually going to get 5 activations before the Soviets do, which is kind of crazy. But they don't need 5 activations actually, because they can activate all of their. They need, I think, 4. Right, because we have our lieutenant, and he can chain activate the sergeant, who can then activate this guy here, and while the lieutenant will activate both the sergeant and this guy here. So all of our infantry will be activated in 1 activation. Then we'd have 2, 3, 4. We could do it that way. So that's how we will do it on the German side. So they can activate all their people, move them up, and then the Soviets will get to activate theirs, and they have 3 because they'll have to activate them all separately. Our 2 leaders, tank leaders, are the top 2, and then the one here at the bottom doesn't have a leader. But as I mentioned, since the Germans, I don't think, will be able to get into range to be able to hit them, they'll be able to move in. The line of sight, we're in the daytime. We're starting at 0700, so bright and early in the morning, sun's up. They can see 12 hexes out over clear terrain, and most of this is clear terrain. It's the steppe. There's not a whole lot on here, as you can see. Got some woods up here, a little spot of woods here, some fields, a village, and a hill, and that's it. The rest of it is flat and open and good tank country, I guess you might say. So we're going to get going here. I'm going to actually zoom in a little bit because, well, generally speaking, you know, like I said, I'm going to move my German forces in this way, and the Soviet forces are going to come in this way. We're probably going to meet up somewhere in the middle here, although we'll start firing at each other at range. The line of sight is 12, but most of these units range. The Soviets' range is 5 for tanks and 4 for direct fire, which would be fire on infantry, HE in some other games might term it. The Germans, the infantry is a range of 5, just so they have 5. And the tanks, some of them have 7 and some of them have 4. So we do have a Panzer II here, which has a relatively short range. I can pick this guy up. So this is a Panzer II. And his range is only a 4, and he's also his anti-tank is a 0, so he's not really giving you much anyway. And then against infantry, he's a 5, and his armor's a 1, and he's got a movement range of 8. Now he's stacked with the Germans' best tank, which is their Panzer IV-E. They have 1 platoon of Panzer IV-Es here, 4 and 4, so firepower 4, range 4, movement is 7, armor's 4. For direct fire, firepower 11, range of 6. So that is our Panzer IV. So he's stacked with the Panzer II. Then I have a 3F and a 3G together, and I have a two 3Hs also together, Panzer 3Hs. All right, so let's get to activation here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'll activate all my infantry because I can do that. So I set this up purposely this way. I put my lieutenant here. Now, leaders can activate, infantry leaders can activate themselves and who they're stacked with, plus adjacent stacks in all 6 hexes around them. And because this guy's also a leader, when he gets activated by his lieutenant, he can then activate all the units next to him, which would be this guy right here. So the lieutenant's activating this stack and this stack, as well as his own, and the sergeant is activating this stack. That's how it works. Now, as far as movement goes, the infantry are in these, the 251s, so they have a range of 8, while the infantry themselves only have 3 movement points. So that's why it's good to be in an APC. Now we do need to look at the terrain effects chart here, and here it is. So you can see clear, movement cost foot would be 1, motorized would be 2, mechanized would be 1.5. Okay, so that's clear terrain. It costs 2 to walk across to ride across the steppe in a motorized unit, and 1.5 in a mechanized unit. Now, if you look at the carrier here, it's hard to tell, but that's a wheel, which indicates that this is a motorized unit, not a mechanized unit. The mechanized units would be like the tanks, which have a track. So, like an armored personnel carrier. These are more open top troop carrier type things, half tracks. So, we're going to move those guys out. Now we do have the ability to use the road, which we will with our lieutenant at the very least. And road is where's road? Road is right here. So it's 2, 3 for foot, which means you spend 2 to move 3 hexes, and for motorized you spend 1 to move 2 hexes, and mechanized spends 2 to move 3 hexes. So that's how that works. So the tanks, with a movement of 8, let's say, could go 12 hexes on here because you spend 2 for every 3 hexes you move on the road. But most of them are not going to be on the road anyway. But our lieutenant will be. And as I mentioned, for a motorized, road is basically a half a movement point per hex. So if he jumps on here, he's got, that's 1, because we have half is 1, 2, 3, he could go 4, 5, 6, 7. He could go all the way to here, which would be a bad idea. So instead, we're going to go, because as I mentioned, we're going to go this way. So he's going to go 1, 2, and then he's going to get into the clear and go off-road. Now this would cost 2, so that would be 4, 6, 8. So he's going to stop right there, and we put a moved marker on him to indicate that he is moved. And then we do the same with the sergeant. Now the sergeant is going right into the clear, so he's got 2, 4, 6, 8. He will also get a moved. And then this guy will come in and go 2, 4, 6, 8. He will also get a moved. We'll put that there. And our last one for our first activation will be 2. And then he's going to go 2 and 4, because it counts, you're moving from into the road. You only get a half when you're moving along the road. So 2, 4, 5, 6, 8. We'll put him, I don't know, I want to do that. So let's say it's 2, 4, 5, 7. We'll put him here. That way they're all kind of close together without being right on top of each other necessarily. Because again, I'm moving these guys this way. I want to get them to the woods if possible. It's going to really be dicey depending on what I decide to do with my Soviets over here. Now we do have 5 activations before they can go, so we get to do another one here we'll do our 3 tanks here. We have an F and 2 Gs, Panzer 3F and 2 Panzer 3Gs. And again, we're off-road here, and tanks, which are mechanized and clear, spend 1.5 per hex. So you spend 3 every 2 hexes. So if he starts here, he's going to go 1.5, 3, or actually 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6. So he'll go here. Actually, he can go 1 more. And we'll drop a... Wait, is that right? I think I did that wrong. Let me try this again. 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6. Yeah, 7.5. So he's here. All right, just making sure, because sometimes I screw this up. 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5. All right, so that would be my 3rd activation. And now our final one will go 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5. They're still in a line. They all basically made the same move. And they're there. So now that's 4, and I don't have any more that I can activate. So now we'll go over to the Russian side. So the T-34s have a movement of 9, if we take a closer look at them. So here we have, and again, I apologize about the focus. I don't know what's going on with this thing. But we have a 9 up here in the movement for the T-34. The KVs, being a heavy tank, only have a movement of 5. So we're going to go 1.5, 3. Now we're on the road. And on the road for tanks, it's 2, 3. So 2 points to move 3 hexes. So we had 1.5, 3. We've got 6 left. So we can move 1, 2, 3 would be 1.5, 3. That's 5. And then 1, 2, 3 would be 7. And then 1, 2, 3 would be 9. Now, they're not in range of any of the Germans yet. The Germans can see them, however, now. and they can see the Germans because we're within 12 hexes now. But their range for direct fire is a 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's still a good 4 hexes shy of where the Germans are at the moment. And we have our German tanks down here, and they obviously are behind a hill, which would impact the line of sight. So these German tanks down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. In theory, I'd have to check it, but these two can see each other. This one and this one would be hidden by the hill. Okay, so let's move our KVs now. We'll go again. We have for road, it's 1.5, or rather half, right? Road is 2/3, right? So they can move 3 for every 2. So 1, 2, 3 is 2. 1, 2, 3 is 4, and they can't move any more. Actually, they can move one more, I think, and be at 5, because it's 2/3 for every hex. 2/3 of a movement point for every hex. So they're there. They get moved. I forgot to do the other one as well. Moved and moved. And then these guys will do the same thing. They're going to come in here for 1.5. And then this would be 3. And then 1, 2, 3 would be 5. 1, 2. I think technically I should have moved this guy first because of stacking rules. So let's just stop him here and put a moved marker on him. Because to some extent, like, these guys will be kind of our scouts, maybe, just to kind of make the Germans be a little bit wary, because we have 2 T-34s here that will probably be able to shoot at these guys on the next turn. We also have these guys back here that are kind of held back and can react to what the Germans do, because we're going to have to roll for initiative again. This is the end of turn 1 now, so we're going to have to roll for initiative to get to turn 2, and we'll maneuver, continue to move, and try to get into position, and then we're going to have combat. So having said that, we will start, we need to roll again. So this would be turn 2. It is now 7:15 a.m. And we get a 6 for the Germans, which is 11, and a 2 for the Soviets. And I just realized I screwed up. I forgot to add their 2. So they actually had a 3 before, so it was 9-3. So the Germans, in theory, should have had 3 activations instead of 5. So that's my bad. Ultimately, it doesn't matter because it's just moving, and nobody's shooting at anybody yet because they can't. So it really wasn't that big of a deal. But now it will matter. So they get a 4, and they get an 11. So that's a 7, and you round up. So the Germans, again, get 4 activations, which is enough to move all of their units before the Russians can. What I should have done, and I didn't do, is clean this up. So I'm going to pause here, remove all the moved markers, and then we'll continue here in a sec. Okay, as you can see, I've zoomed in a bit to kind of tighten up, and as things tighten up in the scenario in general, I will zoom in a little bit more. Probably won't get much more than this, only because the forces aren't going to be right on top of each other. As you heard in the scenario description, the gun duel started at about 1,000 meters. So, excuse me. We get to do 4 activations for the Germans before the Soviets. So that means we again get to activate all the German units first. Although before I shouldn't have. But again, I don't think that really made that much of a difference. I did kind of mess up here because I neglected to get this guy in adjacent to our lieutenant so he could be activated. Now that's probably not a big deal. He's out of range of the Soviets. So depending on the path he takes, he's probably going to need to go this way to avoid getting within range here. It'll be tough to get within range anyway. But yeah, so I think we'll actually start with the tanks down here. So again, we are in clear terrain, and these are mechanized units. So it's 1.5 movement points per hex. So if we activate our Panzer 3Hs here, we can go, let's see, 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6. And then as far as woods go, they can't go into this hex. They're prohibited because to me, that's heavy woods, not light woods. So I don't think we can actually go into that. Sorry, I'm moving the map a little bit. So we're going to go, let's see. We're going to kind of try and go behind the woods and come out on this side. So we're going to go like this. We're going to say, I should be using my tweezers, but I'm stubborn sometimes. 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5. And we're going to stop right here. Now, we do have some, the line of sight for the Soviets won't be great unless they move in this direction. And we'll see. But I'm going to drop a moved on here for now. Now, we're going to have to climb this hill. I do want to put somebody up on top of this hill. So, what that means in terms of movement points, it's +1. So I really need to decide who I want to move up here. So I'm going to move actually my Panzer IV-E and my Panzer II. So it's +1. So it's clear. So it's going to be 1 on top of the 1.5 that it costs normally. So that would be 2.5. And we have a 7 here for the Panzer IV. So we're going to go up. So that's 2.5. Now, if you move to a hex that has it, you also have to pay the slope cost. So we're going to stop, I think. Ugh, come on. These guys slide around too much. So this cost me 5 is how I'm going to read that. And we're going to stop them here. Now, they are uphill, obviously. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They can see there. The range for our Panzer IV is a 4 for tanks, as is the range for our Panzer II, which has a pop gun comparatively. And so now we're going to move these guys up the hill as well. So they will pay 2.5 and stop right here. And they will also get a move. Now that's 3 activations. So I have 1 left before the Soviets can move. So I'm going to activate this guy back here without a leader. So they can still move, and he has a movement factor of 8. They are in clear, which costs 2 for motorized. So that means he can basically move 4 hexes. So if we go 2, 4, 6, 8, we can successfully remain outside of the range of this. So that is a legal move. So his range is 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So he's looking at like this area here. And we're going to go 2, 4, 6, 8, which is clearly not within the range of this guy. So we'll drop a moved on there. Now the Soviets get to move. And I think what we will do for the Soviet side is we're going to move up our KV-1. So they are on the road with a movement factor of 5. And again, the road is a 2/3. So every 3 hexes is 2 movement points. So 1, 2, 3 is 2. And now we have a decision to make in terms of where do we want to go. Do we want to go after the tanks, which would probably be the smarter move, I guess? We're going to have to leave the road, though, to do this. So do we go north, or rather east or west? We're going to go west. So we're at 2 here. Now, if we move here, we're in clear now. And again, we're a tank, so this costs 1.5. So this was 2. That's 3.5. And then here we have a field. So fields cost 3, and we can't enter that. We can move here, which would put us at 5. And by doing so, our range for this tank is a 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we might want to not do that. And I just did that to kind of illustrate the thinking that you might want to undertake. So by staying here, 1, 2, keep moving the map. This is the problem with not using plexi, right? 1, 2, 3, 6, 7. See, he's out of range. So we're going to drop a moved on here. and stop there. Although, let me think about this for a second. You know what? I said I was going to be kind of bold because I want to show combat. So I'm actually going to move this up. Now, this guy already moved, and so he cannot opportunity fire. They have to be unactivated. He's been activated, did his move, he moved here, so he cannot fire at these tanks, even though they've moved into range. So I'm going to slap a moved marker on my KVs here, and that will do it for this turn, for them. Now we go back to the Germans, because we flip, right? And there's also an optional fog of war. I'm probably not going to use that in this. That can end the turn prematurely. That's generally a good rule to use, and I would normally want to use it. But in this case, because we want to get into combat, I'm just not going to use it for this. And then, depending on how this series goes, I may do other scenarios from this game. Another scenario from this game, probably one, to kind of demonstrate other aspects of the system, because we're looking basically broad strokes here, top level, without getting down into, you know, the weeds and the chrome and all that stuff. This is mainly just kind of really fairly basic stuff we're doing in this video, just so you get a flavor of how the system plays, and I'll do the same with the other systems as we go through. So we're back to the Germans activating. We'll activate our lieutenant. Now he needs to be careful, because if he comes within 4 hexes of this T-34, they're not activated yet, they can fire at him. So this is another thing you need to consider when you're playing, is which units to activate, because you can leave yourself with an opportunity for opportunity fire depending on what your opponent does. So if I had moved this guy, he would have been activated, and that would make this guy able to do things that he might not otherwise have wanted to do if he could have come under fire from our direct fire from these 2 tanks here. So what we're going to do is we're going to activate our lieutenant. So again, he has a 251 that they're riding in, and he's got an infantry squad with him, or infantry platoon rather, sorry. So their movement factor is 8, and again, it's 2 per hex. So we're going to go 2, 4, 6, 8, and go up here. 1, 2, 3, 4. He's just out of range. So we will drop a moved on him. Now you see here you have moved on one side and fired on the other. If you put it like this, I guess that would indicate fired. I'm just going to put moved on there, because that's all he did. Back to the Soviets now. And again, they can't fire because he's out of range. But now he has an opportunity to go after this infantry. Or in theory, you could ignore the infantry, because the infantry isn't really a threat like the tanks are. So do you want to go after the tanks, or do you want to go after the infantry? What I'm thinking here is, because these guys are further advanced, maybe we send them after the infantry, and this guy's follow on behind the KVs to attack the tanks. That's kind of the strategy we'll go with. So we're going to take our T-34s here, and again, we're going to leave the road, and I'm going to get in a position where I can shoot at these guys. So maybe I move up the road a little more and then come off. Let's think about this, because on the road we can go 3 hexes for every 2 points, and he's got a movement factor of 9. So in theory, we could go 2, 4, and then off-road it's 1.5, so that would be 7. Yeah, he could get really close. But he's also going to be within range of these tanks if we do that as well. So let's do it, because again, I'm trying to not, I don't want to be completely brain dead, but I also want to make sure that we get some fighting. So we're just going to do this because it's good for the example that we're trying to play. If I was playing this competitively, I would look for suitable scenarios and try to set up better angles for attacking and so on, and etc. Be a lot more tactical about it, right? In this case, I just want to show mechanics, so I'm not going to worry all that much about the tactical part. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3 for 2, 1, 2, 3 for 4. So that puts us here. Then we go off-road at 1.5 each. So that would be 7. Or I can go this way towards the hill. But again, I already said I was going to go this way. So we're going to go, we're 4 here, 5.5, 7. So we're here now. and I can stop or I can move up one more hex. So let's do that. We're at 8.5. That's as far as we can go, and we're going to stop right here. And I've put myself in position where this guy can attack me now. And they can attack me via opportunity fire. And he has the heavy machine gun. Now, they don't have any... in theory, they could fire at me with opportunity fire, but they don't have the ability. They're shooting at tanks, and a machine gun shooting a tank isn't going to do anything, right? It's armored. So, in effect, they can't attack. They can't attack it, which is why he was able to move there. Now, this tank unit does have a leader, as does this one. This is the guy who doesn't. So, in theory, this guy can't move if it's going to bring him into an area where he can be attacked. He can't move into a hex where they can fire at him, basically, is how that works. But they're all out of range. All the Germans, they're all out of range. Let me move this off a little so we can see that that's actually a Soviet. But we got 2 more Germans to do first. So our sergeant can activate both of these, and we'll do that. So we're going to take these 2 right here. And again, it's 2 per hex. So we're going to go 2, 4, 6, 8, and that'll leave him here where he can now activate this guy next turn. So set up a chain activation again. Now this one is an interesting thing, but we have to do the Russians first, and then I'll talk about this guy. So now this unit, again, we're on the road, so we can move 3 for 2. 1, 2, 3 is 2. 1, 2, 3 is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So he's going to stop here. They can't fire at him right now. So in theory, I could continue to move, but we're going to stop right here. Let's not push our luck too much. Okay, so we'll stop there. Now we have this guy. So now let's talk about assault. So the way assault works, now I can't assault, and I'll explain why here, but you have to start adjacent. Obviously, he's not adjacent. So you start adjacent, and you have to have a leader if you're infantry. If you're an APC, you have your inherent leader and can attack that way or assault that way. It's basically fire movement. So it's actually a fire action, but it is moving into the adjacent hex and instituting or instigating an assault. So we can't do that. So I'm going to take these guys and I'm going to move them away from here because they don't have... actually, I should have, now that I'm thinking about it, I had the sergeant here, right? So in theory, I should have activated this guy before, but we'll just, whatever. We're not moving towards this guy. He can't fire at us anyway. So we're going to go 2. Now the sergeant is here. So this is a mess. We were here. So we're going to go 2, 4, 6, 8 and stop there. We'll put a moved marker. And that concludes turn number 2. So now we'll do turn 3, which will be combat. And then I probably will wrap it up. And I may show you an example of how an assault would work. Just so you can see it. But, you know, we might want to wait. Well, maybe we won't wait. We'll see. Anyway, I'm going to clean up and then we'll start turn number 3. Okay, it is time for us to do some combat here. So let's talk about, well, actually, it's not. I have to roll for initiative. I'm just assuming the Germans are going to win, so we'll see. 6-3. So this becomes a 5 for the Soviets, and that becomes an 11. So 11 to 5 is 6. They get 3 activations before the Soviets get to go. So let's talk about fire combat. In this case, this will be anti-tank fire. So anti-tank fire, now direct fire and anti-tank fire. Let's talk about direct fire first, even though that's not what we're going to be doing here. So direct fire uses the fire ratings on the left side here. So 7.5 in this case, and hopefully you can see that. Anti-tank is 3.7 here in the gold background behind with the red numbers on it. Second number is range. First number is basically firepower. I forget if that's what they call it in this game, but that's essentially what it is. It's the strength of the attack. So in this case, this Panzer right here, there's two of them. 3.7s, both of them. They're the same tank. They're 3Hs, Panzer 3Hs. Their range is 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They can hit the KVs. Now, the KV's armor in this red background with the gold number is a 5. That's pretty thick. So the chances aren't great that they'll actually do something to this, but we're going to take a crack at it. Now, direct fire, you can combine your factors here. Anti-tank is different. Each unit fires separately. So we're going to activate both these tanks because they do have inherent leaders. All the German tanks have inherent leaders. They also have what's called armor efficiency. I knew it was something with an E. Okay, so the German tanks have inherent leaders and armor efficiency. So what does armor efficiency do? That is a good question. Let me answer it for you. Armor efficiency allows a tank unit to fire twice in one turn. Now, that could be in a activation or in an opportunity fire, but you can't split them and do both. So I can't do one and then say, well, I'm going to hold the other one, and in case this guy moves, I'll take my second one then. That's a no-no. You can do them together or separately, but not split them apart. So let's talk about the mechanism for our attack here. For each anti-tank attack, the attacker will designate, or the active player, in which case that's this guy, that's the Germans, they're going to designate the firing unit and its target. So we're going to say this top guy is going to fire at the top KV here. Again, you have to, because it's anti-tank fire, you're firing at one specific unit with one specific unit. You don't get to combine anything. That's just how it works. Now, you take, it's really fairly straightforward. You roll 2 dice, you add the firing unit's anti-tank value, which is 3. So we're going to roll 2 dice, add the 3 to that, and then subtract the armor, which is 5. Okay, and then we have an anti-tank fire chart here, this guy, which will tell us the result. Now you can see 9 or less has no result. 10 to 12, target loses 1 step. If it survives at reduced strength, it must make an M2 morale check. So this is when morale becomes something to deal with. 13 or more is eliminated. So just doing some quick math here, right? We have a +3 and a -5. So we're going to take 2 off our die roll. To get a 13 is not possible because the highest you can get with 2 dice is 12. So our highest roll is a 10. So this is how hard it is to destroy that KV. We have to roll boxcars. We have to roll a 12 because of the -2 to make them lose a step. So the chances are this is not going to work, but we get to do it twice. And then we get to do it twice more with the other unit. So we're going to take 4 cracks at this guy. Okay, so let's see if we can get a 12. So we're going to roll both dice. And that's a no. So they got a 5, which is nothing. Now we'll roll his second attack, and that's also a no. We got a 5 again. Okay, so now the first one has fired. We'll do the second one. He'll still attack the top guy. It doesn't matter. We rolled a 4, which is no, and now we'll roll again. And we got 1 6, but we also got a 1. That was a 5 originally before this guy crashed into it and flipped it to a 1. Doesn't matter. None of that's boxcars. They have now fired. I'm going to put a fired marker. I'll just put the moved marker upside down. We're fired. Their turn is over. Their activation's over. Now we do have 4 activations before 3 activations before the Soviets can do anything. We are in turn number 3. This is the 0730 turn. So these guys have now attacked that tank, but nothing happened there. And we would move on. Now, if I had another unit that could hit this guy, we'd have that crossfire I was talking about. where say this guy's range is only a 4, and so is the Panzer 4. So they don't have the range to reach them, and these are both 7, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 doesn't have the, he's not in range. If you have two attackers in non-adjacent hexes firing at the same target in the same turn, they get a +2 because it's crossfire. The idea being the armor, right? Different angles hitting the armor, essentially. I believe that's what the reasoning is behind that. So that's one activation. I'm not going to move these guys. I'm going to make them come to me. Basically, the Germans are essentially on the defensive in this scenario. We're going to make them come to us, essentially. And these guys are a problem. We bounced. Assuming that we actually targeted them correctly and hit them, all you get is a none. But you could say that maybe some of those shots hit it and bounced because of the thick armor on the KV. So let's talk about the other Germans. So now our sergeant here can activate this whole group. Okay. We do have a little bit of a dicey situation now because we've got this tank right here. Now we can also fire at him with this one because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they can actually get him. They can range enough to hit this guy. So we might do that, maybe. But I think what I'm going to do is I'll try and get in position for an assault. So let's talk about that. And that means they'll get an opportunity for opportunity fire, so you'll also get to see opportunity fire. So we're going to have our sergeant activate all 3 of these stacks, and the lieutenant will do his own thing as our 3rd activation, or 4th, depending. So he's going to activate everybody, and we're going to take our infantry squad here, and we are going to move them here. So we're going to activate them, and I think what we'll do, we should talk about dismounting, okay? Because we don't want necessarily to be riding in this guy here with a tank sitting right here that can attack us. It's not really a good idea because he can use his armor attack to attack this guy. And it has a 0 armor because it's a unit, because it's a vehicle. So we need to dismount first, right? So how does dismounting work? 1 MP for both the transport and the unit. So in this case, the transport has a movement of 8. So that's really not an issue to use 1 to unload. So we're going to unload, and I'm going to put, instead of it being under it, I'll put it on top. So now this guy is dismounted. He's unloaded from his transport. That would cost him 1. Clear terrain costs another 1. So he's going to move here. And now he's subject to opportunity fire from our tank. Okay, but he's used 2 of his movement points, and now in a future turn, he in theory could have a shot at assaulting this tank, right? So now the tanks have to decide, are we going to opportunity fire or not? Because we can also move other units up, and this using opportunity fire will basically make him unable to react to any other unit. So you have to decide which one you're going to do it, or do you want to hold off and do something else, etc., etc. You have to kind of consider all your various options here. So a unit can make 2 opportunity fire attacks per turn. So what the rule book recommends is that if you make 1 attack, you put 2 moved fired markers on there to indicate that it's made 1 opportunity fire, and then you would remove the other one when it makes its 2nd, because that basically counts as your full activation and fired, and you can't move. So that's why I said you might want to think about how you want to handle this, because now you can attack with 1 or both of these tanks, right, which have an 8 firepower against in direct fire. So this would be direct fire, not anti-tank fire, obviously. So we'd be using the 8-4 here. So if we attack with both, they can combine, because direct fire you can combine. You can't combine anti-tank, but you can combine direct fire. So they would be attacking here. So that would be 1 if I did it with both, and it would impact both. Then let's say the sergeant moves his unit in as well, that would be a second opportunity, and he could also do that as well. And then the third guy also is in range and could do this as well. So from the Soviet side, you have to think about, do I want to only use one of my 2 platoons here? Then you have 4 opportunity fire opportunities you can use. Or do you want to combine and have only 2, but you get so much more firepower, you're more likely to do something really damaging to the Germans. So in this case, we'll keep it relatively simple. I'm going to say he's going to use both, and he's going to attack this unit. That'll be one of his 2 attacks, and then the sergeant will move, or this guy will move, and that will be the other one. And then the third one can move in, and maybe next turn or I can just show you an assault and what that would look like, because we'll pretend it's the next turn or whatever, because it's getting long and I don't want to drag this on all day. So here's how we're going to do this. We've got our guy here. He's an infantry. He's moving. He's eligible to be attacked by opportunity fire. We've got 2 T-34s here. They each have an 8-4 attack rating for direct fire. So we add that together. Total the direct fire strengths. So that would be 16. You find the column on the direct fire table, which is this column right here. And you roll it down, you read what it is, you roll 2 dice. Real simple. There are modifiers, but none of these will actually apply because this is clear terrain, no entrenchments, no nothing. So there's no entrenchment. We're not in town woods, heavy woods, or jungle. The target occupies or is fired through. Nope, not. Target is fired through a hedgerow. No. Unit fires into out of smoke. No. Target's dug in. No. Target is on higher elevation. No. Target occupies an anti-tank ditch, dragon's teeth, etc., etc. None of those. So we're just going to roll 2 dice here on the 16 column and see what happens. And I'm going to put 2 markers on here to indicate that they've made 1 opportunity fire attack. And we rolled a 3, and a 3 is an X, and an X is 1 step lost to 1 combat unit in Hex, except closed top AFVs. And 1 step loss to 1 non-APC transport unit, which doesn't apply here. Owning player decides which unit, blah, 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 right? Step losses are ignored, in absent categories are ignored. So all closed top AFVs must make a morale check. All other units must make an M2 morale check. So we'll talk about the morale check in a second, but the main point is these guys get reduced. So that was a pretty good roll. They've now been reduced, which also changes their morale from an 8 to a 7. And now we'll talk about the morale check. Okay, so the way morale works is, again, these guys have a morale of 7. It would be 8 if they were at full strength. Since they're reduced, it's a 7. We roll 2 dice. We add 2 to the roll because it's M2. If it was just M, you would just take the roll. If it's less than their morale, they succeed. If it's higher, they become disrupted. Really straightforward. So actually, it could be demoralized as well. I forgot about that part of it. So let's roll, and then we'll talk about what happens. And that's a high roll, so this is going to end up being demoralized. So what happens here is the roll needed to be a 5 or less for them to succeed, because they had a 7 and it was an M2. So you add 2. So since it ended up being 5 over essentially their morale, if it's greater than that morale number by 3 or more, they get demoralized. Here we go. This is a demoralized marker. On the other side is the disrupted. So he's demoralized, which is pretty bad. All right, so now we're going to take our sergeant, and he's going to activate this guy, and we'll move this guy in as well. And he's going to do the same thing. So it's going to cost him 1 to dismount. And I should actually put moved markers on the transports as well. Whoops, I had 2 there. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3. We'll put it right here. Now, he's not in range to actually assault, but he can be fired on by these guys. So let's just say that they fire at him, because there's no guarantee the sergeant's going to move there. I mean, ultimately I am, but we can pretend he doesn't know that. So he has to make a decision here, and he's going to say, you know what, I'm going to take a shot at that guy. So it's the same situation. We roll again. This time we rolled a 10. Now a 10 on that chart is an entirely different matter. This is an M1, okay? He's at full strength, so it's an 8 is the magic number. There's no adjustment to it. We roll, and we got a 7, so he passes and has no effect. So that actually worked out okay. So there was one good roll, one bad roll. We remove one of the 2 markers here to indicate that they are now ineligible to do anything else. And now to finish our activation, the sergeant is going to unload with the machine gun from his transport. And he's going to go 1, 2, 3, and he's going to stop right there adjacent to that guy. And we will put a moved marker on him. And they are now eligible to assault on the next turn. So that was the whole point of that. And now we have our third and final activation, and I have to decide if I want to use my tanks here or hold them. Because if I use them and fire at this guy, then that enables these 2 to basically do whatever they want, which I guess isn't that big of a deal, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to fire here at this guy. Now again, we're going to look at the tank, the target. It's got an armor of 4. His firepower is only a 2. So again, we're going to take a -2 on the attack. And we don't have crossfire. So you know what? I think I'm actually not going to do that. So let's say we're not going to do that. I really need to use my tweezers here. Sorry, I get lazy sometimes. These counters really slide around easily on the map. So you have to, that's why I say I should be using my tweezers. So let's just take our lieutenant here. We'll activate him instead. And he's going to go towards the woods here. All right. 2, 4, 6, 8. And we'll stop right there. Now you might say, why are you doing that? And that's a valid question. Because ultimately, since the tanks are out in the open, it's going to be hard to approach them to do anything anyway. So that's the 3 German activations. Now we're going to go, I need one more moved marker here. And now we go over to the Soviets, and they get to do something. So this guy's obviously done. They have 2 activations, but they can only do 1 of them. So let's move our KV up closer so that we can start seeing if we can do some damage ourselves. So again, it costs 1.5, so he can basically move 3 hexes. So 1, 2, 3. And now he's in range, 1, 2, 3, 4. He's in range to shoot at this guy next turn. We'll drop a moved on him. Now the Germans get to go again. Now the Germans can fire 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They can't fire. I was thinking maybe 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, he's 8 away. So he cannot fire at this guy. So what I might do to give myself some more options here is I'm going to move this one back here and put a moved on him. And then on my next activation, I'm going to move this guy here, which will give him, he'll still be in range of this one. And from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's close to being in range of this one, but he will be in range of this one. So next turn, we could do a crossfire between this one and this one at that guy, assuming we roll high enough on activation. So that is the plan. Now we need to move our T-34s here. So let's take these 2, and we're going to move them. He needs to be careful. We're going to move them this way. So, whoops, even with tweezers, I'm a clumsy klutz here. 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5, 9. We'll move them there. Actually, let's move them here, because now they have a potential crossfire against this guy. 1, 2, 3, 4, although he's not close enough yet. Oh, it's 5. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That works out perfectly. So as you can see, we've now got a situation where these 2 can fire at this guy, and this one can fire at this guy. So we're getting a little bit more of what you would call your tactical situation setup, right? And they were out of range, so they're going to move up 1 to this hex. We'll slap a moved on there, and that will end this turn. I will pause, clear off the markers, and then I'll do at least part of the next turn to show you assault and crossfire, and then I'll probably wrap it up because, you know, it's long. Okay, so let's roll for initiative. And it's 2-1. So that's 7-3. So the Germans will get 2 activations before the Russians do. So that will allow us to do our assault that I was talking about. Now we're going to activate. This guy right here. So we're going to activate our sergeant and this unit. This unit can only attempt to rally, so we'll do that. This guy is going to assault. So we're going to assault this hex right here. And so we get to see how an assault will work, right? So let's talk about assault now. Okay, so basically you add up, both sides add up their direct fire values. The Germans have a 9 and the Soviets have a 16 because of the 2 tanks. So this is going to be an interesting one. So here is our assault chart. Okay, now we do have column modifiers. We'll talk about that in a second. So the Germans will be in 9 by default. But you look at these and there are no negatives because we're not uphill, we're not against a river, and the defending units don't occupy a town, entrenchment, or cave. They're not in the woods, jungle, etc. And this one does not apply either because all units of attacking side have higher morale and leaders have no effect. So the leader's morale is a 9, which would be higher than the Soviets, but he doesn't count. The units are both 8s because nobody's disrupted or reduced, rather. But we do get a +1 because we do have an undemoralized friendly leader and at least 1 non-AFV unit. So it's going to get shifted to the 13 column. So we'll roll 2 dice for the Germans first here, and we got a 7. So a 7 in the 13 column is nothing. Nothing. Great. Perfect roll for the Germans there. Now the Soviets have a 16. So they will also be in this 13 column. They don't get any adjustments at all. And they rolled a 10, and a 10 in the 13 column is a 1. So the number is step losses to enemy combat units of any type in the hex, and step losses to any non-APC transport, which we don't have. Step losses, all surviving units check morale as M2. So our machine gun gets reduced, and they're going to have to do a morale check. And it's an M2 again. So their morale, by being reduced, goes to a 7. So again, it's a 5. And the sergeant, so theirs is a 7, and theirs is a 9. His is a 9. He doesn't have any modifiers, so it's going to stay a 9. So basically, we need to roll less than a 5, or 5 or less for him, and a 7 or less for that. And so a 9 would be, again, it's more than 3. So he's going to be demoralized. And now we'll roll for the leader, and he's an 11, so he will also be demoralized. And they have to move back as well. Okay, so now we have to do the morale check or recovery check for this guy because he was also activated. Now they don't get any assist from the leader because he moved for the assault. So they just need to roll a 7, less than a 7 to recover. And they do, they roll a 4. So they've actually recovered, and that means they don't have to retreat. So let's put a moved on them to show that they were activated, and the same over here. Okay, so that's one of the 2 German activations. Just to show how crossfire would work, let's talk about that real quick, okay? So basically you'd get a +2 on the die roll of an attack when you have 2 non-adjacent units that fire at the same target. So if we were firing at the KV1 here, the initial activation wouldn't get that. But the second one, when we activate this guy, which will actually happen after the Soviets get to go. So instead of, I wanted to show the assault, but if I were playing this for real, I might have held on to the assault and done my crossfire here to kill tanks, because tanks are more important in this scenario. So I would have said, okay, this stack is going to activate and fire at the KV-1, done the attack. Then I would have activated this guy, and they would get to attack with a +2, which with the, well, I might have done this one first because of the difference in firepower. These have a 3 and these have a 2. So let's say we did this one first. Probably not going to do anything to this guy because of his 5 for armor. Then we get this guy. He's going to get a +2, which will negate that. So the 3 + 2 would be a 5, which is negated by the armor. So it's a flat roll. And then you have a much better chance of getting a 10, 11, or 12. Well, I shouldn't say much better, but better, right? So that's how that would work. And I'm not actually going to play it out. I think that description covers it. So I'm going to wrap this up because, as I said, the video's gotten very long. I don't really like doing videos of over an hour. But I felt like to give this system, to show it and provide, do it justice, essentially, in showing you how it kind of works. And there's a lot more to it, obviously. It's a very, as I mentioned in the first look, this is a mature system. It's been around for 25 years. It's in version 4 of its rules. It's very well refined. There's plenty of chrome in there. It works. And, I think the people that have had problems with Panzer Grenadier are probably have had problems with components or things like that. Some of like long waits for, they may be pre-ordered and paid and wait a long time to get the game. Like more publisher related stuff, but I believe that Avalanche Press is doing a much better job. I have no problems with any of these components. The components are nice. I also don't have a problem with the map. Yeah, it's kind of dark, but as you can see, the counters stand out against it really good, and you can tell what all this stuff is. You might not like the brown, but you can tell what all of this is. And let's face it, dirt is brown. So if you're on the steppe, it might be pretty brown. I don't know. I've never been to Ukraine, and Ukraine's kind of, they're at war right now, so things over there are pretty messed up. But I've never been there, so I don't know what the terrain looks like. So that's going to do it. Hopefully you guys got a good idea of this. Hopefully I didn't screw it up too much. I'm sure there are plenty of people around who know this system much better than I do, and they may chime in with, hey, Joe, you screwed this, that, or the other thing up, and that's fine. But hopefully you got the gist of how the game plays, and you can make kind of your own judgment on whether or not you might think this is for you. As I said, there will be at least three other games that we're going to look at that are also platoon level tactical, possibly 5. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. But this is the oldest one, and I felt like it would be good to start with the elder statesman, so to speak. So that's why we did Panzer Grenadier first. So that's going to do it. My name's Joe. This is Hexed Countered. Thank you for watching. And until next time, happy gaming.